Welcome everyone, Nick Andre here once again with our Xfinity Pro Track Guide at Team Conti Sim Performance. And we are at Chicagoland Speedway, a really fun combination. We haven't been here in quite some time, so it's actually going to be a good refresher course for us to really attack this racetrack, learn some avenues that we need to think about for our mindset and how we're approaching the racetrack, some cornering, and especially through different parts of our run. So I'll put my webcam on here relatively soon, but I just want to let about the first 5 laps play and just unfiltered, just let you guys see the video of it running 5 laps in a row, and then I will sit and dissect this with you guys on how I approach the racetrack, other ways we can approach the racetrack, and get our balance of the car how it should be. So let's let this roll. Okay. That's 5 laps here. So now I'm going to bring my webcam back on. And hello again. Now, fast-paced track. You guys saw some really fast-paced on throttle time at Chicagoland Speedway, and that's something we're going to be able to have the first 5 to 10 laps. Just being able to utilize that throttle, modulate our partial throttle phase, and minimize our minimal speed loss, right? That's what your goal is at a racetrack, to minimize the speed loss you're going to have, whether you're slipping the front tires, sliding the rear tires. We have to refine what we're doing on the track to make sure we're not doing both at the same time or any trait like that and limiting those qualities. So I want to really dissect our lap 3 here, okay? Just to start our run effectively. I was relatively, a high five here, first 3 laps, right? So I managed my pace pretty well. Your second lap's probably going to be your optimal time here at this track, second or third, depending on how you build your confidence up throughout the start of a run. So now you can utilize the apron at the start finish line here, right? You can utilize going down to cut to the grass. I'm not a driver that does that from start to finish. at this track just because of the shaping you need to continue to hold this. Because that's actually adding more stress to the right front when you're trying to progress from the banking up to, or from the apron to the banking. And that's going to hurt your quality of the right front more often because you're just adding stress to continue wrapping the the really the apex of that start finish line and continuing to wrap around the apex of the grass. So I just would not advise that from the start of a run to the lap 30 or 40 of a run. At a certain point where you know you're not going to scrub anymore right front and you feel you got the car turning and you can open the wheel up how you want, you could do that. You may have to shave some time off trying to catch some people, and that's okay. But just want to preface that that's going to add some tire issues, maybe at the longevity side of a run, and get to the right front sooner if you're already on the tighter side. So let's kind of dissect turn one here. You don't really have a lot of true markers, right? You really do not have a lot of true markers for where you're looking to turn into the corner and away from the wall initially. But best thing I can tell you, how I interpret my turn one entry is my eyesight, my line of sight is just looking where the actual stands end, right? And I want to make sure I'm parallel with the wall as much as I can here and get as close to it without hitting it, right? Because I want to upset my car in entry. But let's slow this up. I'm gonna get as close to as close as I can to this wall, and before, I know it's very hard to tell, but before the actual stands end, and such, I'm already starting to pivot away from the wall a little bit, right? You can see I add just a little bit of wheel, I'm tracking up, and then I'm actually going to start turning now to set up just a hair. It may look like very little bit, and that's because I love the quality of setting up for my trajectory on entries by setting the car in a straight path, right? And once I start lifting, I'm going to have all the capability of the front. As much as I'm creating on entry speed, to make sure I'm not over utilizing the fronts when I'm lifting, meaning I don't want to dump weight to the right front. I say this every week, but it's very important on a track like this when you don't have a lot of reference points. So at this point now, I'm looking at my exact entry where I want to place the left front and cross the seam down here. Because now we're actually starting to go downhill just a little bit, downward slope into some banking. So you can tell I'm going to start getting to my lifting phase here pretty soon. And once you see this effectively seam patch, you're going to see I'm going to start lifting. And I'm going to do this in a little bit slower mode. But I'm starting to turn away before that patch, right? And I already pinpointed where I want my apex to be. I want to be around this white line for the center of the corner to mid-exit, okay? And I'm putting the right front, and I'll give you a good point of view here, above this point. It's going to be a little hard to see, but this point right here, putting the right front above it on this point of a run and of this patch, just to let you know. And that is important because I want to make sure I'm not lifting too early and using too much wheel input before that point to get me loading down too shallow of an entry. So I'm starting my lifting phase relatively in this zone, right, before I get to it. Just a hair, maybe where the splitter crosses that patch, okay? And I'm holding that partial throttle when I'm loading into the banking. You got some bumps here, you're going to have some fluctuation of the dynamics of the car, the splitter, the rear's going to raise, bounce, stuff like that. But if you have a fixed percentage of throttle to where you know you got the front turning down the hill in this banking transition, turning down the hill, crossing the seam, you can hold that partial throttle. I'm holding this partial throttle all the way until I get to my apex. It does not really change because that's the minimal throttle I want to run, but also I'm managing my entry speed into my center speed, right? So in turn, that's helping me manage my minimal speed during cornering. And this whole process, I'm managing the balance of the car, how I need to attack the track. And by managing that balance, I'm keeping the front of the car turning and the rear of the car turning, but I'm not adding too much wheel input to break the car free. Okay? So I'm trying to keep the car consistent, which is why I maintain partial throttle all the way once I land into the banking And you can see this whole process again. Let's watch this. Managing this partial throttle stage once I land in here, and I'm not changing that by 20%, 15%. I'm maintaining partial throttle. This is maintenance throttle. And once I got that apex that I have now in the center, you can see I'm wrapping this weight line with some, it has some added grip. So I want to get the left front as close to this point as I can. And I'm adding a little bit more throttle, a linear partial throttle, and I get right on top of where the left front is on top of that painted line, okay? And once I know I have the grip and the balance of where you feel the transition of the car being able to turn, now you can start working that linear process up on throttle to feel confidence on full throttle moment, right? And you can see I got to my full throttle moment pretty easy. I worked a linear partial throttle phase all the way up to 100% throttle once I could actually maintain good compliance, maintain the balance of the car. And if you look here, before the iRacing logo and billboard on the right is when I'm actually back to full throttle, opening obviously first 3 laps of a run, right? So I can have that quality on newer tires to be able to do this. So that's 1 and 2 explained, what I'm doing throttle wise. And this is where it's tricky on exit of turn 2. A lot of people will open the wheel up to this light and open it up too early, thinking they have all the grip to, open the corner exit up, but in reality, it still narrows off because it's still a continuing turn actually all the way down the back straight. It's not a back straight. It is a back stretch to where it actually has an actual curve to it still, and we'll work on that because there's a safer barrier that actually has an end on exit of 2 here, and we're just right here. I like to get the peak of my exit around this phase right here where it's obviously very difficult, but you're going to see where the safer barrier here, this is your safer barrier, as actually going to the concrete wall here. And you could tell that difference because of the height of the actual concrete wall is taller, right, than the safer barrier. So find this point on exit if you're running a low line to utilize for your actual peak of your exit of turn 2. And you could tell right here, this is not a straight really, correct? You can see how this still curves and bellows towards left, like a left-hand turn like we obviously have on ovals. And it continues to have that radius. So you don't really have a lot of time to open the wheel up. When you open the wheel up, it's when the rear of the car actually settles and unloads as well, because then the front's going to actually unload at a different point when you open it up fully. So now we get to a straight wheel and put just a hair, and now we're starting to kind of curve back to follow this radius of the backstretch. Now turn 3, you seen what I did in turns 1 and 2 in lifting, getting to my partial throttle, and you can have that same, you're looking for the same type of balance of what you felt in a car when you did that, whole process, what I did in that whole process. You're looking for the same readability of the front, meaning the capability, the same turn radius, but it's a little bit different because the shape of the corners a little bit different on entry too, right? But you're looking and trying to feel the same type of balance. You're trying to feel the same type of balance when you start lifting off the throttle. Not even completely, maybe, but you're trying to lift off the throttle and maintain that partial throttle. And then when you return back, you're trying to feel the same exact quality that you did for center exit of turn 2. But on this side of the track, we have more bumps on entry we have to worry about. So we're not really hitting the splitter at all this week, and it's a good quality because we need to work through turns 3 and 4 when we're running the bottom. Now, not really an easy process to turn in here because of overloading the right front if we turn too late and we're trying to get to the bottom. So it pays off to understand where you need to place the car before this light on entry to turn 3, because it is much like turn 3 at Michigan. You can turn in too late and have to dump too much throttle out to get the front to turn. To whereas if you actually shallow your entry up just a hair at the initial turn away from the wall, you're going to have a lot better ability to dictate the rate you need to lift off the throttle. In other words, how quick you need to roll off the throttle, or if you need to roll off of it completely, just to give yourself better capability with the front end. But remind yourself, you need to keep the front and rear working together. You need the front continue to turn down into the corner entry, meaning all the way down into the banking to hold your apex line, which is the white line again. So let's look at this. I'm turning away from the wall. I found my light, and by the time I get to the light, my car is pointed all the way down to this white line before I even fully lift, before I even start lifting. Now, if I want to get down to that white line easier, I would start my lifting phase, right? So let's slow this up. Before I cross this middle seam, I'm starting my lifting phase, and I'm partial throttle again, much like I was in turns 1 and 2. I'm a little bit less throttle because I'm going through the bumps, and I know I'm going to go through the bumps, so I don't want to create more of a handling issue with too much throttle, because now I'm just going to throw the car left or right, depending on how aggressive I am on my entry speed. So I'm finding this, again, quality of staying on this white line, clipping this white line around where the billboards end, okay? And I'm going to continue that apex as much as I can and wrapping this white line, hence the apex as well, as long as I can. It's a hard quality because of how bumpy this side of the track is at the center portion of the corner, leading into the center portion of the corner, and all the way on exit of really turn 4 narrowing a lot quicker than people think, because you have to maintain that momentum on exit. So a lot of times in this phase, it pays off just to keep your partial throttle phase later into a run a lot longer of a duration to about here. So the opening laps here, you have all the grip to be effectively quick on utilizing the grip that the tires have. So that's a full in-depth lap of me explaining it on new tires, and I would like to showcase how we progressed a little bit later into a run. So let's go to lap 20. We'll do this as well. Let this play for a full lap and see the difference that we have compared to lap 3. You can see I'm just a lot less partial throttle, but I'm maintaining that partial throttle longer now. And especially in 1 and 2. I didn't have to fully lift, but if you feel like you need to fully lift, don't be afraid to do it. You can fully lift if that's the quality you feel better doing. But you can tell, again, I minimized my throttle side of entry throttle, and that helped keep the car balanced. I'm managing, again, that balance all the way into the center of loading into the corner as well, and maintaining the balance of where I'm trying to find my minimal speed in the corner. Once I find that minimal speed, which the longer you go, more often than not, that minimal speed is just before you're able to actually start working back to your linear process of 100% throttle, okay? So hopefully that gives a little bit more in-depth look of where your speed is lost, possibly, but and can be gained on keeping the balance of the car neutral and capable through the center of the corner before you get to your 100% throttle moment. So let's go to a chase perspective here on just a couple laps, and I'll go back to this last lap of lap 20, chase perspective, and our exterior perspective, and let it play again, and then we'll move up to the top around lap 26, 27, okay? So let's look at this throttle side again. Look at our throttle. It's going to decrease a lot more than lap 3, but I'm holding it all the way to keep this apex. And let's reference this again. Our minimal speed right here is before I get to my 100% throttle moment. Right here's min speed, and we're past the center of the corner, about 5/8 to 3/4 of the way through turns 1 and 2. And now I'm going to start that 100% throttle moment, and now I'm starting to regain that time. And I'm starting to regain some momentum back. That's just because the tires get hot and lost a lot of grip. Same quality in 3, very limited throttle, maintenance throttle, wrapping the white line, and then just keep the car straight as possible, working 1-to-1. So, again, exterior perspective, we'll let it do another lap here, and then we'll go to our lap 25, 26, maybe 27. Good apex portion again, maximize my exit there. Turn in turn 3, center of the track, partial throttle, wrapping the bottom a little bit longer. Really hard to wrap the bottom sometimes here just because of the bumps like I referenced before. Alright, so let's go to our lap 20. I'm going to go to 28 because I actually felt this was a little bit better. This is our lap 28. And I'll let this play in, again, chase perspective. I'm not at the wall here, right? Because if you get closer to the wall, if you remember Homestead, the tighter you get. So you really find the point where you want to get the car at its tightest area. And I'm not getting right up against it because I want to make sure I maximize my drive off of turn 2. Now turns 3 and 4, I'm also running the higher line, and 3 and 4 on the high side. This is probably the peak of where I want to get my really high line of the corner in 3 and 4 because I don't want to go to the wall through the bumps. I want to give myself some room to let the front turn, and I'm going to utilize doing that transparently, just lower on the track instead of at the wall. Now this line in 1 and 2, I find to be a little bit better for longevity because I can get some more momentum built up to the seam and get some more room built up to where I can straighten the wheel up sooner on exit in turn 2. It's just something I like better. My mindset is just let the car work a little bit lower and keep some partial throttle in it just to make sure the car is turning. And you can use these seams to really get at the point. And if you use those seams as well, it's going to be a little bit of a detriment sometimes because of it actually wants to create a, de-race the car and get it to actually point and pivot. Now, this is our lap 30, okay? This is a pretty good lap 30. Maximize my drive off of turn 2. And turns 3 and 4 I think is really good as well. And after this lap, we're going to do a pit entry. I'll do it in actual interior so you can see the perspective of it. And let's get ready to switch it here. Interior. Maximize the potential again. I just go back to the bottom just to give a good difference of how you actually have the grip and momentum built off of turn 2. And going into turn 3, my mindset is, okay, I know I need to worry about my entry down crossing the banking to the apron. So I'm going to utilize this banking as long as I can. Okay. Pretty easy entry. It's not maximized to like 100%. Maybe we're in 85 to 90% of my capability on entry, okay? So I'm partial throttle at the center. I'm not going to use more throttle just to try to gain time at the earliest portion. I want to make sure I'm partial throttle to manage the balance of when I actually get to my braking, okay? And I'm just managing, running the weight line, downshift to third, and we'll downshift to second. And you can see how I'm still on the brake and keeping myself on this line. I'm not going above the seam to be in the racing line, okay? And once I cross this, get the front slowed down enough to where I have the grip to turn, I'm off the brake to turn left and make sure I'm crossing the banking down on this apron with no brake at all because I don't want to slide the front. Now I have all this turn and I can straight line my entry down at the braking at the rate speed we need to at 50. So I'm going to slow this back just a little bit, do this in exterior look so you guys have a good perspective. And we will close the video out after this. Off the brake, make sure we're below the cone so we don't get a penalty, and that's just pretty good entry, okay? So we had a lot of discussion on how we can attack the track, how I'm keeping my partial throttle, and limiting our speed loss, limiting where we're trying to keep the front capable and keep the rear under us on entry to the center on the on-throttle side of the lap. So this is a really fun combination. It's actually one of the most fun combinations I think we can have in this Xfinity series. So I think we have a good potential on attacking the low side of the track, high side of the track. I think in 1 and 2 you can attack the middle of the track. 3 and 4 is going to be skeptical of running the second lane just because of how bumpy it is on entry. So if you run that second lane, which is effectively just above that first seam, and put the lefts on the first seam, you're gonna run into where you're just having to wait on the front to settle. And once it settles, it may be too aggressive for the car to turn, and then you're taking some speed loss out of the center, and not really gaining a lot of lap time because of your entry phase and the bumps. But overall, you got any questions? Always here to help out. And again, it's going to be a fun week. I'm excited that we get to showcase our cars at Chicagoland Speedway. And if you got any questions, a DM away, tag me on Discord, whatever you guys need. Always here to help out. If you want me to look at some data, please don't be afraid to look at our notes that we have in our setups here and use that weather and get some data collected, and I can look at them as well. Look at your data if you're comparing to my testing session that I give you guys. So with that said, gonna close this out, and you guys have a good rest of your week. Let's have a good Chicagoland.